Hello everyone and welcome to my little corner of the internet. My name's Michael and I'm bitten by a radioactive book. Today we continue our guide into fantasy and this week's topic is portal fantasy. Now the definition of portal fantasy is quite easy. It means that a character from our world goes through some magical portal of any kind and ends up in a secondary world where he experiences some adventure. Well, that sounds quite simple and fascinating, doesn't it? But actually, if you look closer into this very interesting genre, you will spot some things that might surprise you. I think many of you would suspect me here to start with the Chronicles of Narnia, but I'm actually not doing that because I think the genre has some deeper roots in literature. When I think of the beginnings of portal fantasy, I personally think of like Orpheus and Eurydice, because in this Tales from Ancient Greek, Orpheus goes into the underworld to get back the love of his life, Eurydice, because she died, and he faces like Cerberus, crosses the river Styx, is in the realm of Hades and tries to get his love back. So this is some kind of portal fantasy, because the realm of death is not real. It was at the time believed that there would be something like that, but not proven, so it's actually a fantasy. The same goes for the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. You have the main protagonist going through purgatory, hell, heaven, on his journey to find God, or not to find God, or actually it's a bit about his soul coming to God. And if you take a step back, you will see that these two books have some things in common. For example, they deal a bit with gods and a bit with characters that are really unhappy in their lives for various reasons. In those cases, both loss of a loved one, but that can be something else as well. So actually what this tells us about portal fantasy, or the origins of portal fantasy, is that there is some kind of divine element to it, or theological or philosophical element, and we have characters of a very specific type. Now let's focus on that character type first for a second, because I said characters deal with loss or general unhappiness in life, and that is often what happens in portal fantasy. The main protagonists in portal fantasy often have a problem with their actual current situation in life. They're unhappy with it, or with their general role in the universe. And that is where the theological element comes in, because we all have characters, if you want to say it very dramatically, who are in a bit of a feud with God. Or if you want to say it a bit more broad, that just are generally not happy with their role in the universe, or with how they are placed at the moment, at that time in the universe. And so going through the portal into a secondary world where they have an adventurous life, this adventurous life often brings out qualities in the character that the character did not think he had in our world. The journey in itself and the experience often help the character to overcome what hindered him or her to be in a better place in the real world. So the whole journey through the secondary world is pure character development to get the character from a position of feeling helpless, feeling frustrated, to a more empowered self. That is what the journey through the portal is actually all about. And thus finding, of course, his or her place in context to the universe. And that can have totally different outcomes. There can be characters for those this journey is a healing process, and so the journey helps them to accept their role or build on their role in real life and go on from there. But we can also have characters that find a total new meaning of life in the secondary world, and then decide to stay in the secondary world, which is of course reflected back to the reader, something maybe the equivalent of changing your life around, starting something new, taking a risk, maybe going to another country or something like that. And that is why characters of portal fantasies are often very relatable to the reader, because picking up fantasy can be a form of escapism, and so the reader who might be unhappy with his own or her own life at the moment is in some kind of the same position as the character. And so characters are often relatable, or often they are not, because they are so uncomfortably close to us. I often see in portal fantasy that that readers react very strongly against the character. No, he's also whiny, and oh, I don't like him, and stuff like that, because they are so they hit too close to home. Actually, that is something. If you experience this very often, that you say, oh, this is such a whiny character, and why doesn't he act all brave there and is a better person? Ask yourself if that's maybe the case because he hits too close to home. Would you really be the person that goes out there and is the adventurous type, or might you actually be the same person with all the doubts? So, as you can see, characters on the one hand are very, very interesting in portal fantasy. The second element of portal fantasy that is of interest is, of course, the world itself, because in secondary worlds, or novels that are mainly about secondary worlds, you can ask questions, of course, regarding our own world. You can set up different political systems, different social systems, maybe with other approaches to gender or race, or science, for example. And by setting them in this secondary world and making them different to our world, of course you can make some kind of subtle statements toward our own society. But with portal fantasy, you actually have the opportunity to get those two elements into dialogue. The character coming from our world can actively comment on the secondary world. And there you can take many approaches. You can have like utopian approaches where a character comes into a realm where some of the issues in our world are solved or just dealt with in a different way, and so you can let the character from our world comment on that and say, wow, that is something that doesn't work for our world, why don't we do it this way? Or you can have the other way around, that it's a bit dystopian, that maybe there is a really mean society that is far more oppressive to maybe women or people of different colors than ours is, and so with this kind of over-exaggeration you can talk about the issues in our world by letting the character reflect upon it. So portal fantasy, as you can see, also has a lot to offer about social or political commentary in our world, because there is actually a commentator with the character coming from our world. So let's head into the recommendation section. The first book I'd like to recommend is, of course, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. It's a classical portal fantasy where 4 children come into this magical realm of Narnia. I think I don't have to talk too much about it, because most of you have read it or at least experienced the movie at some point and know what it's all about. But I wanted to mention it here and honor it here with the place in the recommendation, because it's maybe one of the most famous portal fantasies there is. Now I'd like to continue with some more classical portal fantasies. The first would be 9 Princes of Amber by Roger Zelazny. The Amber Chronicles by Zelazny, it's a 10-book series, and the basic idea is that Amber is the one true world, and there are a multitude of other worlds that are actually only shadows of Amber. And our Earth is one of those shadows. And Corwin, the main character, is transported to our world, wakes up in a hospital and has amnesia. So technically the portal element is not so much a character directly from our world, but a character who thinks that he is from our world and then gradually figures out what the whole concept and world of Amber is all about. This is a very classic tale. The actual books are always on the shorter side, so there's actually like a bind up of all the 10 books available. So if you're looking for that, that is, I think, a good place to start to read more classical portal fantasy stories. Another very classical portal fantasy series is the saga of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. Thomas Covenant is a cancer patient, and his life seems to be almost over, but then he gets into a magical fantasy land, and that of course changes his life. And if you look at the title, Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever, Thomas, the Unbeliever, is actually a referral to Thomas the Unbeliever from the Bible. So you see the element we talked about in the beginning, like that there's always a bit of a divine element because the person is very unhappy with his place or her place in the universe. That is actually reflected here, in a great way, because it makes this connection to a person who is very unhappy with his life, finding a solution, finding his way in a new into a new world. And if you follow Thomas's journey, you can always look at this kind of element and ask yourself, what is actually the context between him and the universe in a broader sense of the story, and that's very interesting to figure out. Next up we have a book by Catherine M. Valente. She might be more known to you through her children's book, The Girl That Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making. And I saw Deathless, another book by her around Booktube, but the one I want to include here is Palimpsest. Palimpsest is a tale of 4 characters that all like fit this category of being very unhappy in their lives, and they all find a way, actually most often through sexual interactions, to get into a kind of fantastical city there. And this book is highly imaginative, and it's a very adult way of dealing with the topic. Very interesting. If you look this up and see, I gave this only 2 stars because I personally didn't connect with the characters there, but that is a very, like I say, personal view, and I thought that as a kind of portal fantasy, and as a very different kind of portal fantasy than the usual person comes into the world, there is a hero story where they more or less go on the typical hero's journey and succeed in the end. That is actually not the story Catherine M. Valenti tells there. So the adult content is not that much about the sexuality in the book, but more about really adults having adult problems and trying to solve them by going into this magical city. And I think for a lot of people that will be very appealing, and the imagination she put into the city is mind-blowing. It's a really great world building. So please don't get like confused by my rating, because that were very personal reasons for me not connecting with the characters, but the kind of world she made, and the quality of the prose is very good. And last but not least, I'd like to mention a book I know almost nothing about. It's part of my TBR abyss, and it is The Magicians by Lev Grossman. I wanted to include it here because at the moment it seems to be like a bit of the booming, current portal fantasy. It's a story that is often, referenced to as what if Dumbledore had found Harry Potter in a state where he is like a college student and is already involved with girls and drugs. So the main character here is older and has different issues than maybe Harry has, and there is this element of him becoming a magician involved, but on the other hand there's also like a magical fairy land that is a bit of an homage to Narnia. And these are the 2 elements the book seems to have. And I think I'm going to read it's a trilogy, and all parts are out now, and I'm thinking about doing the trilogy at some point next year. So that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed this little trip into other worlds through a portal. Next week we're dealing with a very specific kind of fantasy. We're looking into military fantasy. So I hope to see you there as well. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more of me, subscribe to my channel. If you want to know what's coming up on my channel, please look inside the description box. There's a little segment there called On the Horizon. I wish you a good day and hope you get bitten by a really good book too. Bye.